Good morning. I'm Jim Check with Corner Now. We basically only have one big headline today, and that's an election has been called. And on the phone with me from Ottawa, Ian Burns. We're late today because Ian stranded on the side of the road in a snowstorm in Ottawa, waiting for somebody to come and tow him in his car.
Yeah, not very nice. That's spring for you, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I got that call at 6 a.m. and saying, yeah, here's a reason not to own a gas car because the engine did something like a puff of black smoke, and then you sit in the cold, right? Can't run the heat.
Yeah, no, I was envious of the EVs that went past me, put it that way.
But the big news, though, obviously, this is the kind of like news that we were kind of expecting, but it finally has happened. Mark Carney has called the election, and the election date is, I'll let you do the honors.
April 28th.
There you go. So basically, 6 weeks, and we will get an election, and Canada can decide. I mean, whatever they decide, it'll be a mandate, hopefully, and hopefully a majority either way, because these minority governments have not served us well in this last two liberal terms.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the polls, I mean, it has looked very good for the Liberals lately, but it doesn't really look like sort of majority territory, not particularly. So, I mean, it's a very realistic prospect, I would say. I know that people probably don't want to even think about this, but it's a very realistic outcome that we'll have another minority government. And I almost feel if that happens, there should be a national conversation of like maybe should we just have another election straight away? Because there's no way we can function, that this country can function at this time of crisis for 4 years with a minority government. I mean, they are inherently dysfunctional. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's potentially another crisis for another day, but it doesn't look good right now.
We got lots to talk about in the election, though. We got our uh, Mark Carney teamed up with Canadian or of Canadian fame, I should say. He's now an American citizen of Canadian fame, Mike Myers. And here we're going to run this his ad here that's been put out everywhere.
Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Mr. Prime Minister, Mike Myers, what are you doing here?
I just thought I'd come up and check on things.
You live in the States,
Yeah, but I'll always be Canadian.
but you live in the States.
Yeah, so?
Do you remember Mr. Dressup?
The children's show on CBC?
What were the names of Mr. Dressup's two puppet friends?
Casey and Finnegan?
Bud,
Spud?
Howie,
Meeker?
capital Saskatchewan.
Regina?
Tragically,
Pip?
you're a defenseman defending a 2-on-1. What do you do?
Take away the pass, obviously.
What are the two seasons in Toronto?
Winter and construction?
Wow, you really are Canadian.
Yeah. But let me ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, will there always be a Canada?
There will always be a Canada.
All right, elbows up.
Elbows up.
What do you think of that?
Well, many things I thought. Number one is what's going on with his hair? Has he actually dyed his hair, or is that grey hair? If so, that's interesting. I'm interested in that, Mike. The other thing I would say is who wrote that? Who wrote the script? Because it's like, was it Mike Myers himself? I don't know. And I'd say Carney was surprisingly good in that. He didn't seem too clumsy, did he? I thought he recited his lines pretty well. Though it was all over the shoulder shot, so I don't know how many. I don't know if that was like all done in one, or if it was like stitched together. But yeah, I mean, I didn't realize Mike Myers was such a hardcore liberal, but they must have thought, let's get the celebs in. And he was one of the celebrities. And then straight away, some like 22-year-old intern will have just said, yeah, but he lives in America. He's not really like, what can he say about Canada? And then they thought, okay, let's write the entire script about how he's really Canadian, even though he lives in America. But I don't know. I mean, look, you have to acknowledge that was quite good, I thought, and is likely to be effective with certain demographics. But I wouldn't imagine that's going to persuade anybody that's a conservative voter
Yeah,
or
I
even
mean,
like an NDP voter.
I'll give my 2 cents on it here. I thought it was the most inauthentic ad ever. You have two people that have left Canada, and then taking their business to the United States in this time when they were supposed to be Canadian. And I would say to Mark Carney, who took his company to the United States, his headquarters, bring it back then. If you want to prove you're Canadian, bring it back. Say you made a mistake and bring it back. Mike Myers, he actually has a U.S. citizenship. So I mean, because you know the names of the characters of Mr. Dressup and all that, that doesn't prove you're Canadian. How about some of the people that have, that have been on cattle drives, that have been on oil rigs, and like the people that have been here for the last 10 years and haven't abandoned Canada. Both of them have abandoned Canada for better riches elsewhere. And it seems like the two most inauthentic people talking about what makes you a Canadian. It just does not resonate with me at all.
Yeah, I think, and that's been the primary criticism, hasn't it? And they obviously tried to bat that aside. That's what the whole skit is about, isn't it? Is trying to
Yeah. And I
bat
would
it aside.
say,
But no, I think it's accurate to say that just knowing a few things about like hockey and
yeah,
what was the other thing, like Mr. Dressup and all that, and
yeah,
something about
that
Toronto,
doesn't prove.
like that's not quite adequate, is it?
Yeah, both of them have abandoned Canada for the past. I mean, his wife, Carney's wife, lives in New York. Their business has been moved to New York. Mike Myers has moved to the United States. These people are the wrong spokespeople for Canada. Like, I mean, if you look at it, it just doesn't make any sense to me that Mike Myers, and it's pulling the playbook that Kamala Harris used, right? Get the stars up there, Beyonce, and all these things. It didn't work for her either, right? But I think Mike Myers is the wrong person to talk about Canada.
Yeah, I mean, there's a clear like attack line there that is he's almost offering that up straight away. But I do think, I mean, he's been in the US now for a really long time. Is it like nearly 40 years or something, like 30 or 40 years? He's been there so long that I can't really imagine that he knows all that much about modern Canada and or at least life in Canada, you know? But obviously it's beyond that, isn't it? He's born and raised in Canada. He obviously has Canadian identity. That's not something that you can take away from somebody. But it does seem a little bit peculiar when he, as you put it, like he went off to sunnier pastures, didn't he? Quite literally, he went off to live in California, I think.
Especially
Or is
when
it New York actually?
especially when the whole attack line for Carney is like, like he's fighting for Canada, and like we got to fight the Americans. We got to do all this stuff. Literally, then bring your business back, bring your headquarters back, do something that shows. The actions speak louder than words, and then all I hear is words. Like, as a Canadian, as a young man, I've done everything from worked on a farm, a chicken ranch, been on the combines in the wheat fields. Been on cattle drives, worked in the oil rigs, worked on the green chain in the sawmill. I mean, get somebody like that to talk about what it means to be a Canadian, as opposed to a guy that went off to the United States and now comes back to tell you who Mr. Dressup is.
Well, unfortunately, it's almost like a curse, isn't it? People that become celebrities in Canada so often just bugger off to America, don't they? If you
Yeah.
just think about all of Canada's most famous people, like Justin Bieber and all, like Mike Myers would be an example. They basically all live in America. Although I do think Ryan Reynolds still lives in Vancouver, doesn't he? Some part of the year at least. So maybe he's the exception.
Well, there you go. Get Ryan Reynolds in.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought it was really inauthentic, and it really speaks to the superficialness of it. Like, that's what I mean. It seems very superficial. Like, when Kamala Harris got Oprah Winfrey to speak, and then we find out later that they paid her $2 million to speak at her event there.
Yeah, well, they said what did they say? That was actually a fee for the set or something like that, didn't they? They
No,
tried to excuse it.
they
So
said they did. They said they didn't pay Oprah. They paid Harpo Productions, which Oprah owns. So that was their thing, right? No, it wasn't
yeah.
paid to me directly. It was paid to the company that I own directly, right?
My people.
My people, yeah. So yeah. Anyway, um,
It is funny though. I mean, just my final word on this anyway. The Liberals, it's a weakness of theirs, and they've done something that I do have to say, I think it's quite smart what they've done, because this is their main weakness, is that like they don't look like they've been there for Canada all the time, or that they're fully connected to Canada. You know, the accusations of them being internationalists are strong and effective, I think, and Pierre Poilievre has used that a lot. But I think they've almost like leaned into their weakness and they've said, okay, let's let's sort of make fun of it. Let's get someone else that's also left Canada in the form of Mike Myers, but then kind of try and patch it all up and say, look, we're still Canadian kind of thing. So it's quite a sort of it's a bold move, let's
I
say.
give it.
But I think this shows that they know it's a weakness and they're trying to kind
I
of
mean,
like shore up that weak flank, aren't they?
I mean, you can't help but know it's a weakness. Again, move your company back, Mark Carney. Disclose your assets so that we know there's no conflict of interest. There's a lot of things you could do. You could actually show some actions that show that you care. Anyway, we got more from Mark Carney.
He could also get rid of his other passports, couldn't he? His Irish passport and his British passport. I think he's trying to get rid of the British one. I'm not sure about the Irish one.
Let's remember he was recently asked what he identifies as. He says as a European. He also has said in an interview that he is a global elitist. So there you go. And then he tries to say because he knows the name. He may not even have known the name because he doesn't know the price of groceries in Canada. Remember that interview or in the debate. He did not know the price of groceries. So there's that.
Yeah. And actually, now we mention it, I'm pretty sure Mike Myers, his parents, I think, are from Liverpool, aren't they? They're from England. So he actually has very strong European connections as well.
There you go. So we got, and they're starting to hand out the candy. Here goes the candy man. He's got. We're going to play this clip here, where he hands out some candy.
Deal with this crisis is to build our strength here at home. As part of that strategy, today I'm proposing a middle-class tax cut to help all working Canadians get ahead. We will cut the lowest income tax bracket by 1 percentage point. For a middle-class tax cut that will benefit a two-income family by up to $825 a year.
There you go. Here comes the breadcrumbs. $825 a year for a family. Let's remember that's not for an individual. $825 a family. They also got to remember that the Liberals in the past 5 years have raised the CPP and EI, what you pay, which is the payroll tax. They've raised that by over $1,000, and then the businesses also pay that. So that's been raised, and that was one of the Pierre Poilievre's attack points a while ago, was the payroll tax. So that's gone up dramatically since the Liberals have, plus the compounding carbon tax and all that. And then they asked Carney how he was going to pay for that, and you know what he said? Basically, Doge. Right? He says, we're looking at driving efficiency in the government. Well, you and I talked about it on Friday. One of the ways to do it is you got 474 government employees that cost $200 million to administer the carbon tax. There's no carbon tax now, so why do we still have them? And there's no planned layoffs or cuts there yet.
And that's money that's been spent. We can't get that back. That's just in the garbage, isn't it? Really, completely. Now that he says it was, even Carney, there's like unanimity in the political class that that was a mistake and we never should have had the carbon tax. So that's just $200 million that we'll never see again in the trash can there. But yeah, wow. I mean, this is an interesting one. If I'm gonna give it my based on my experience of politics, let's put it grandiosely. I think he was a bit naive there, where he said 1 percentage point. Whereas if you look at what Pierre Poilievre did, he's doing it by 2.25 percentage points. But that's not how he sold it. That's not how he advertised it. He advertised it as 15%. So he took the sort of bigger stat, the bigger percentage that was on offer. So he figured out the percentage decline that represents, 2.25. And he said, actually, it's 15%. So, I mean, he's been out. This is the first big policy announcement of the election. And I feel like on messaging, at least, he's been outsmarted right away by Poilievre, who is an old hand and knows how to do stuff like this. And I think that's really going to show as the policies are announced and as the speeches continue to flow, because that was a bit of a rookie error, really. Because if you just say 1 percentage point, most people don't really think in percentage points, and I don't think that would have broken through. I don't think that was the best way to advertise it. So I mean, this follows their $2.7 billion Christmas GST holiday
tax break, the taco chips and tinsel tax break. And then Frank Bayless said that it's easy to say we'll give you this and we'll give you that, but let's be clear, we do have a deficit and we have to address that. We can't promise that. And when asked if the GST, the taco chip and tinsel tax break was a good idea, he said no. He said, I'll be honest with the Canadians on this issue. We have to bring some discipline to Ottawa. And that was Frank Bayless, who ran for the leadership. I think one of the guys that was actually the real outsider in that group there, other than Ruby Dalla, and the one that got very, very, very little media attention, Frank Bayless.
Yeah, they just didn't want to hear from him, did they? Didn't want to see him. They didn't want to hear any of his policies. But no, it's true. I mean, lest we forget, the reason that we're having an election right now is because Chrystia Freeland was given a poisoned chalice, told to go out and say that we've got a gigantic deficit, the economy is all doom and gloom, and then be fired or resign right afterwards so that she could swallow that poison and go off into the hills somewhere and be forgotten about like a scapegoat. That's the reason that we're having this election ultimately. And we can't put that out of mind. The fiscal, the fiscal position right now of the federal government is bad, really, really bad. There's a lot of, they like to talk about the low debt to GDP ratio, but it's still like 60 or 70% or something of GDP. It's still like shockingly high outside of actual like wartime. But just because it's not like 300% like it is in Japan or whatever, that doesn't make it okay. But the deficit is tragic. So that means, the government is spending more money every single year than it's raising. And that's been the case for quite a while now. So where's this money going to come from? It is very important to have a sort of a strong fiscal position, and we don't. So yeah, I mean, that's something that Mark Carney's going to have to explain, especially when the Liberals, the whole Liberal attack line against Pierre Poilievre is he's going to cut everything. It's going to be cuts, cuts, cuts. But if the deficit is huge and you also want to spend more money, like with this tax cut that Carney's talked about with increased military spending and so on, so how are you going to do it? How is that going to work? There has to be some kind of balancing of the budget.
Well, Mark Carney has said that basically he's saying that they're going to spend less as a government. So basically his version of Doge, copying the Elon Musk model, I guess. And he said that in itself will create room. But, like you just said, don't the Liberals always say, oh, if you vote in the Conservatives, they're going to cut, cut, cut? And isn't that what he's saying? He's going to cut. So it's kind of odd, no? But we gave Mark Carney some time. So let's play this clip of Pierre Poilievre doubling up there and saying he's going to cut income taxes by 15%. Go ahead and play that clip, Ronald.
A father and a son sitting in a park on a bench, and the son said, "Dad, what is an income tax form?" And the father looked at him and said, "Well, son, it's the opposite of your report card. The better you do, the more you get punished." It's the fine you pay for the crime of working hard.
And that's on top of all the other taxes you pay. There's the GST and PST and HST, capital gains tax, the carbon tax on top of the gas tax, property tax, payroll tax, tax on imports, tax on exports, sin tax. The list goes on. When you add it all up, Canadians spend more on tax than on food, clothing, and shelter combined. And after the lost Liberal decade, the government is taking more of your paycheck than ever before. Most of these Liberal tax hikes happened while Mark Carney was Justin Trudeau's economic advisor. Now Carney proposes billions of dollars of additional spending that will mean even higher taxes for you. Electing the Liberals to a fourth term will only make your tax bill go up. Today, as we kick off the election, I'm announcing that common sense Conservatives will cut income taxes by 15% for the average Canadian. The average Canadian earns $57,000.
A couple, each making the average income, will save $1,800. The average worker will save $900.
But because we'll cut the rate on the lowest income bracket, everyone who pays income tax will pay less of it. As a percentage.
There you go. We gave Pierre about equal time with Mark Carney's two clips there. And there you go. He doubled up on it and like you said, framed it a little more impressively, I guess would be the word.
Yeah, it was better salesmanship, I would say, and that's one of Carney's. In a way, it's kind of in like old-fashioned sense. If we were in a political science class or something like that, or public relations department or whatever, they would say, "All right, 1-0 to Polyev there." But this is quite an. There's one thing I would say about this. Like we're in an interesting period where it's almost like Carney represents a kind of like anti-politics. So he makes a lot of these obvious mistakes, but in a sense, it's the Liberals must be thinking like, well, look at the polls. Like obviously he's popular, and I think part of the popularity is that he is not what they call like a retail politician. He's not like a sort of salesman really, whereas Polyev really is. And I've mentioned this a few times, but Polyev's huge advantage in terms of his political experience might ultimately backfire somewhat. So we have to wait and see. But Polyev is doing things by the book. He's doing things like really as you should as a politician. He's getting everything right in the sort of old sense. But like I say, because of that anti-politics mood, I don't know. It could still backfire. But
I mean,
on the face of it, that did seem like a rookie error by our boy Carney.
I would say that with Carney, it's very inauthentic because it speaks to elitism. Whereas, what Polyev, like people want to know what's in it for them. Really, at the end of the day, this is where the politicians are actually listening, right? We've seen for the past 10 years where they don't listen. You and I have tried to even get comments from them, on so many issues, and they don't want to listen, don't want to talk, and they seem tone deaf and told you that the recession or the economy was a vibe. Bill C-18 was to help independent journalists and all that stuff, but obviously that's not the case, right? Yeah, speaking of Chrystia Freeland, though, and my phone going off, we're having a quite the morning here.
That'll be her, won't it? As usual, she likes to call
Chrystia
up
Freeland
this time.
calling in and saying, "What's going on?"
Where's my picture?
Here's her picture right here. This is her campaign kickoff. This is Chrystia Freeland kicking off her campaign. Her and two guys standing in front of looks like a bus station or something like that.
Yeah, or is it not the the train?
Could be.
Yeah. I think I don't know what it is. Some Toronto thing.
Yeah. So there she goes, kicking off her campaign with her. Chrystia Freeland has lots to answer for. She was the finance minister, and the deputy prime minister in this carbon tax, which now they all say was a bad idea. And she even said that the past 10 years has been wasted by the Liberal government with virtue signaling and identity politics.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were just talking about deficits there, weren't we? The Liberals ran a deficit just about every single budget. I mean, there was one budget a couple of years ago where they had a relatively small surplus, but I mean, that's her legacy. So, because she was finance minister for a lot of that period. So, I mean, she does have a lot to explain.
She also said the GST freedom, like that 2-month holiday on GST on taco chips and tinsel. I call it taco chips and tinsel because it was on snack food, really, and some things like Christmas trees and Christmas decorations and that. She said that was just a political gimmick as well. That cost Canadian taxpayers $2.7 billion, this political gimmick.
Yeah, that was something that she kind of attacked, didn't she, in her resignation letter? But she seemed to be even more upset about the other thing that didn't succeed, Justin Trudeau's other like last ditch attempt to survive, which was the sending out money. What was it, $250?
Yeah, that failed too. Like, there's no money. It's kind of like the Premier EB
just didn't
deal.
happen.
No money,
Lots of
no
hype.
money. Yeah, lots of promises and no delivery. Premier EB, if you're listening, where's the $1,000 that you promised British Columbia? Same place.
Do that in Tony Soprano accent as well.
Yeah, same place as the $250 promised by the Liberals. Nowhere to be seen. Yeah, Chrystia Freeland has lots to answer for, because when Canadians did complain, she said the economy is doing great. There is no issues. It's just a vibe.
Yeah, and she did it in her uniquely, how do I express this? her uniquely bad, I'm just gonna say, political communication ability, which she tried to improve that, didn't she? And I think that's kind of why she was fired. That's what, oh, she wasn't actually fired, but why Trudeau wanted to get rid of her is because he thought, this is what we read in the rumors, the rumor mongers. They say that he thought that she couldn't communicate very well, which is very obviously true in my opinion, because she struggles. She struggles to get points across, particularly when it relates to like normal people, not in her sort of elite set.
Yeah. So also the self-proclaimed feminist that berated American voters for not voting for Kamala Harris also abandoned Chrystia Freeland in favor of an old white guy, not even from Canada at the time. The irony is just too incredible to even talk about.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we're actually going to specifically talk about it, but then you have the Nepean situation of turfing Chandra Arya. It was banned from taking part in the leadership race, and then kicked out of his constituency.
And to make room for who? To make room for who?
Indeed, to slot in the Carney man.
Yeah, so they booted Chandra, took his money. I don't know. Maybe he didn't have to give any money. Ruby gave money though, and then the global elitists from Europe, the European, took their spots. So there you go. It all depends on how you play it out, right?
If I didn't raise my head here, if I didn't put my hand up for the leadership, then I would have survived. I'd still have a seat. Unless this was a long-running scheme, and that's why he ran for leader, because he wanted to kind of go out with a bang or something. I don't know, but it looks terrible. I'm very surprised that it's already been swallowed by the news machine. It's just gone. But I just think that's craziness. They just got rid of this guy, and then they were like, "All right, in you go, Mark. Slot you in there."
Yeah, just basically ran over Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gold and Ruby Dalla, and then yeah, and we anyway, we could go on forever just about that. Obviously we got to give some time to our friend Jagmeet Singh. Let's play a little clip from our friend Jagmeet.
You also seem to tie both Carney and Poilievre to Trump in their own ways, if I'm reading that correctly. Do you think both of those leaders are Trump-like in their own way, and is that part of your strategy in this campaign, to tie them to the U.S. president?
Well, let's be clear. Donald Trump has come out and endorsed Mark Carney. Elon Musk has endorsed Pierre Poilievre. I'm the only federal candidate that is 100% not endorsed by the Donald Trump administration.
Whenever
I love that smirk and slurp combo there. The glass of water.
I love when Jagmeet starts with, "Let's be clear." The guy that has completely never been clear about anything.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's say has been accused of not being clear about anything.
He has a
But
tough...
it's an interesting proposition, isn't it, that he's putting forward? Like, I'm the only real, true, loyal, patriotic Canadian here. I'm the only one that's not working to the advantage of the Americans. But I would humbly submit, Mr. Singh, that if it were even possible, if it were feasible that the NDP could get a majority, I sense that Donald Trump and his friends would be very, very excited about that prospect. I think they would love the idea of an NDP majority in Canada because, they don't have a lot of experience. Let's put it that way, and their policies haven't been tested really.
Under Jagmeet's leadership, the NDP have been able to say stuff that's completely ludicrous because they don't have the responsibility of actually holding government, so they can be as crazy as they want to be. But the sad reality is, though, it's for the past two Liberal governments, they've held the stick of power, and they've wielded it over Justin Trudeau, who had no guts to actually, do what was right for Canada.
Well, they tried to say that they were doing what was right for their voter base, didn't they? Which they would say were Canadians that earn less than a certain amount, I suppose, like Canadians that didn't have dental coverage and so on. That was their priority. But then, yeah, whether or not those policies have been particularly successful, that's another question, isn't it? But also, I mean, Jagmeet Singh, one of his biggest policies that I can remember, and I'm somebody that sort of watches this for a living, so God knows what the average person can remember. But something I can recall is basically what amounted to price fixing for certain groceries. I mean, can you imagine if we actually did that? Imagine if we actually had full-blown price fixing during an economic war with the United States. I'm not sure what our chances would be there for survival.
Yeah, and Jagmeet Singh is going to have a tough time winning his own seat. I think a lot of Canadians are definitely really disappointed in what the NDP has done and propping up this Liberal government for this long, and like with this compounding carbon tax, and it's definitely hurt our economy. The lack of all suppressing our natural resources and all this stuff. I mean, we could think of all we could have for social programs if we tapped our natural resources. Instead, we've had a really rough go with that.
Though we hear lots of promises now about that being fixed, don't we?
Well, here you go, Danielle Smith. She's definitely being vocal here. She said Mark Carney comes to Edmonton, says he opposes oil and gas production caps, and heads back to Ottawa and promises an oil and gas production cap. And then he's been accused of a couple of times now where he spoke to different audiences and gave different messages.
Well, yeah, usually in different languages, which seems to be some like an opportunity that is seized quite often by politicians in Canada, isn't it? One of the reasons that I have my doubts about the whole official bilingualism thing when it's not. Canada's not in reality not a bilingual country. It's a bilingual elite, but it's not a bilingual nation. So you get this situation where politicians can speak quite literally at two sides of their mouth, two different languages, and they can say one thing. I mean, particularly when Quebec, obviously that's the only time you're ever going to speak French, happens to be so immensely powerful and also very, very different from the rest of Canada. So they actually want to hear different things. It's not just that you have the opportunity to, it's almost like you have to. So, yeah, I mean, he's rightly being accused of that. And it's not just this one. It's not just the mission scout. It's also pipelines, isn't it? It's other things where he's kind of been a little bit tricksy.
Yeah, he's said too. It's like this is not the first time. Definitely not the first time. And then like back to the original one when he was when he said he had nothing to do with Brookfield Asset Management moving their HQ to New York, and then the receipts were provided, and then he's like, oh well, the move happened after. I just authorized the move. Moves take time, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it just landed on his desk like that morning. It's like, oh, really? Okay, let's move to New York then.
Yeah. So anyway, there you go. And then he held a speech here in Newfoundland. And they locked out more than 50 Newfoundlander fish harvesters outside, so they couldn't come in. And this is from Ashley Burke from CBC. Mark Carney, more than 50 Newfoundlanders, fish harvesters outside the Mark Carney's rally in St. John's. We could play the clip, but it doesn't do much. They're just all milling around and keeping them out. Police said they were told to move them outside. The front doors are being locked. Carney started his speech by saying he wants to acknowledge them and is here to listen. Hard to hear them when they're locked outside.
It reminds me a little bit of when his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, came to West Kelowna and talked about how great independent media is, but we had to effectively sneak in to that press conference because they weren't going to tell us where it was because they don't like us.
Yeah, and then we got to ask the question about Bill C-18, and then he went on this rant about how he supports independent journalism and will never bow down to the giant Meta, and then guess what's happening? They've bowed down to the giant Meta, and the Liberal Party and the government of Canada is now advertising on Facebook because they say they can't get news on Facebook, so they have to pay to get it on there.
Well, they also said something along the lines of like it's just really important, isn't it? We can't quite get our message out through the traditional sort of local media channels. We've got to go to Facebook. But we are denied that opportunity. The Liberal Party can avail itself of that opportunity, but we can't do that as a news outlet because of Bill C-18.
Yeah, no, it's almost like that movie sometimes, The One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, like how crazy it is. Like you're saying in this speech, the CBC reporter pointed it out. You're saying they're there and he's here to listen. Obviously, it's hard to hear when you lock them outside the door.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem dreadful, doesn't it? I mean, it does sort of remind you of some of the excesses of the 20th century where the masses, the people were being told that we have there's not going to be a famine. We've got loads of food. We're surging ahead technologically. We're going to win the war. We're going to do this, and it's like all just bollocks. And the people just had to sit there and swallow this nonsense because that was how degraded the political culture had become.
And
I fear that obviously we're not in 20th century crazy times right now, mid 20th century, I should say, but I do fear that the political environment has degraded to such an extent that this is happening. We are hearing obvious falsehoods, and like in this case here, the evidence it could not be more clear. Like literally, however many meters away from Mark Carney, people are trapped or locked outside of a speech while he says, "I'm listening to you." I mean, it's just craziness, isn't it?
And it's the same Liberal Party that said they're supporting independent journalism, and Mark Carney, at least on 2 occasions, has frozen out journalists from attending, other than what he calls approved journalists.
Yeah, and they often do. They often say things in Ottawa. They often say things in the actual precinct of Parliament, like the premises of Parliament, where as a journalist you can't get access unless you are granted permission by some weird self-important group of people who don't like granting permission. So, I mean, that's already a closed off environment. So whenever they make those announcements in Parliament, that's very, it's very much closed off. That's very much a safe space for politicians because they know they're not going to be asked difficult questions because they know the reporters, they know who they are, they're not scared of them.
And then Mark Carney has also gone on American media and to get his message out there, as well as, I think we can all remember we played that clip with his very condescending attitude towards Rosie Barton of the CBC, which is, like a very friendly media outlet to the, and we're going to talk about that in a second, to the Liberals.
Yeah, generally speaking, it's pushing against an open door with the likes of the CBC. I mean, particularly Rosemary Barton, it has to be said, she's very often accused of being biased in that direction, though she vehemently denies it.
And that's our next story here. This is the Holly Doan's Blacklock story. You can subscribe to their service. You can go to Blacklocks, and then it's about $314 a year. Well worth it. She digs out some of the best stuff, and that's what she does. She tries to hold government accountable. And this story, little support for CBC boost, and that was Pascal St-Onge, the Heritage Minister, saying that they basically need to double the support for the CBC, and independent media can do what? I'm not sure, because we're still choked off with Bill C-18. This said that there is the Senate, a Liberal Senate appointee said there is no appetite to increase funding for the CBC. A renewed CBC must continue to operate in roughly the same current budget and inflationary increase going forward. In a CBC report, and saying it's an essential service and all that. Parliamentary funding for the CBC last year totaled $1.4 billion, a record. Management has said that they need another $400 to $500 million in additional grants, according to the November 25th testimony by Catherine Tate. That's pretty big bonuses that Catherine's looking for, no? Although she's gone now, but seems to be a lot to ask.
She needs to get a new apartment in Manhattan, probably, doesn't she?
Well,
they don't come cheap.
Pascal St-Onge, not, like she heard that, I guess, and says, why stop at $400 to $500 million? Let's double it. Let's go to $2.8 billion. And she said that they also need to make CBC an essential service so Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives can't defund the English-speaking part of it. But this report goes on to say the CBC needs to attend to complaints of its bias on an ongoing basis by having an external party conducting an annual review of public report on bias, wrote Cardoza. Management must stop being defensive on the issue of bias and protect and proactively identify its blind spots and how to address them. We need real data about the issue. And that, like that, they do say they're unbiased, but I mean, most Canadians would say they're completely biased.
The reality is that every person and every institution, whether it's in the media or not, has biases. That's just a fact of the human existence. And to try and ignore that or deny that is just, on the face of it, is just ridiculous. It's just a completely stupid thing to attempt to do. But in the case of the CBC, it's particularly ridiculous, I think, because it's not like this is some obscure theory on like a sort of dark corner of the internet that like these people wearing tinfoil hats come together and say that the CBC is biased. Pretty much every conscious human being that I've ever spoken to with any knowledge whatsoever of the CBC acknowledges that it has a liberal bias with a lowercase l. They are liberals. Of course they are. Basically every journalist you've ever heard of is a liberal, lowercase l, liberal. And there's obviously a lot of crossover between lowercase and uppercase l's there. But I mean, that's the reality of the situation. So I agree with this senator here that like to try and be defensive and deny it is absurd on numerous levels.
Yeah, and this is a Liberal senator as well, right? Liberal Senator Andrew.
And he's a
Cardoza.
fan. Yeah, he's a fan of the CBC as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's just saying, let's come to the reality of it. But like, like Pascal St-Onge, who was not running, as I haven't heard her say she's going to run, because she had, Anita Anand had said she wasn't going to run, but all of a sudden she's back in, running. So Pascal St-Onge, I haven't heard her say she's going to run. I don't know if there's somebody already named for her seat yet.
She's not. Yeah, I think she's out.
Yeah, so she left a big gift there when so did Trudeau, saying that they should double the funding for the CBC. That's a nice little boost for the CBC to help them make sure that the election goes the right way, with that little carrot hanging over them there.
Well, yeah, certainly. It's like, what do you want? Double your money, or lose your pension and lose your job? It's going to be pretty easy for them to make the decision, isn't it? The CBC employees.
But if you think about this too, just from a business perspective, just say you're running any business, you're running on a budget of $1.4 billion, which is a record. So you've been doing with less even prior to that. And then they come out and say, not only do you need this record amount next year, you need another $400 to $500 million. Like, look at that increase.
Yeah, and then
look at that
increase. Ask, where's that coming from as well?
Well, the taxpayer.
Given the discussion that we just had about the deficit, where's that coming from? Is that going to be loan? Are they going to get are they going to sell bonds to pay for this extravagance? What are they going to do? Are they going to cut I don't know, like pension provision or something like that? What are they going to do to make this possible? Because we're obviously in a bind. We've had deficits for like 9 of the last 10 years. Things are not great. A lot of debt. When you look at the GDP, debt to GDP ratio, they like to brag, but it's actually really ugly. It's a very ugly fiscal scene right now in Canada. So how is that going to be paid for? I mean, it's quite an extravagance, isn't it? When you think about the sort of things that aren't available in Canada. For example, a doctor when you need one. How can we afford this?
And the other thing is that the CBC, the management, the executive, has been extremely ruthless with even its employees. Like, they took bonuses while they laid off people before Christmas. Like, it's like, it's definitely elitist, right? Like, instead of like making a sacrifice for the employees to make sure that there's more journalism out there and everything, they basically cut people so they could have bonuses. And then here they're asking for $400 to $500 million more money. And then Pascal St-Onge is like saying, well, we can even do better than that. But that's like a 35% increase in the budget. Like, most companies can't do, you know what I mean? Like, you can't have access to that just by saying you want it, right?
And they also don't have, there's no way that you could measure their sort of success and say that it's increased by 35%. It's not like they have a 35% increase in ratings or whatever, a 35% increase in trust among the Canadian people or anything like that. I mean,
well, they said
haven't
it themselves.
Improved by 35%.
that their television audience is shrinking, that they're saying that it's basically dying, and that but they need the money for digital. And like Bill C-18 is basically blocked digital, like the free part of digital. So what are they going to do? Just like pump money into different platforms, as opposed to like independent journalists being choked off? Like basically they're funding our competition while having their knee in our throat. That's what we've gotten from the Liberals. There might be some bias here too, right? Because our business is basically at the mercy of this government right now. We've asked, how many times have we asked, Ian? How many times have we asked to speak to somebody?
Oh dear me, I lost count probably last year. I would say it's too many times.
Over 100 media outlets failed, I think, now since Bill C-18, and 3 more to fail here in May that said they're going to close down completely both digital and their publications here in the Lower Mainland. And there we go. Independent journalism continues to fade. Look at the stock chart of any media outlet that's publicly traded, and you'll see what I'm talking about. 10 years of basically media destruction and favor for a few.
And the argument as well, it's interesting that you talk about this evolution, the digital evolution or whatever, innovation that they want at CBC. Because Holly Doan, Blacklock's publisher, she said to you twice, you've interviewed her twice, and she said it both times, that in effect, what the federal government or the Liberal Party's policies towards media, so to subsidize certain, like the biggest media outlets, what that in effect does is stifle innovation, because they just suck on the teat, the taxpayers' teat, and they don't evolve. They don't, because the necessity is not there. So they don't innovate and they don't develop and they don't look for new ways to, tell a story. So she was saying that they're kind of like dinosaurs being propped up, these like zombie companies, which, as you're mentioning the stock charts, yeah, that they are zombie stocks, aren't they? In a way, when you look at it on just in the sort of the brutal graph.
They're basically the Walking Dead. You know what I mean? The amount of debt they're carrying basically is crippled them to the point where they're likely, unless they get continued bailouts, they're not going to make it, right? The government for media needs to get out of the way. Absolutely get out of the way and stop interfering with media. A free country does not have a government interfering in the media.
Yeah, well, I think her argument is, we've seen this elsewhere in other parts of the economy, haven't we? Where like if the government comes in and props up part of the economy, like this happened in the whole Western world in the 1970s, where it was like the old ways didn't work anymore. There was competition from Japan and the East, and they didn't evolve because they were being propped up because they had special interests. And sure enough, they sucked. I mean, one example is the American car producers in the 70s, like and 80s even, like they were just junk, weren't they? Nobody wanted them because they were crap, because they hadn't evolved. And it puts me in mind of a quote by Antonio Gramsci, which is, the old is dying and the new cannot be born. That's where we are. The new needs to be born.
Yeah, they need to get out of the way and let media sort itself out. But they need, like, media should not be interfered with by the government. That's not a free independent media. And we're seeing, maybe that's why we've had 10 years of the Liberals, because we haven't had power accountable. Like, the reason the government, one of the reasons the government prorogued itself was because of the Green Slush Fund, where they wouldn't reveal the documents. And that still hangs over the government. You know what I mean? Like, why don't they release those documents? They have been as opaque as possible.
Yeah, that was the cause of the impasse, wasn't it? And it's ironic you say that, because that Liberal senator, in reference to CBC, said the one thing that you can't proceed with is opacity. Sorry, he says the thing that the public are unlikely to forgive is opacity. Well, send an email to your own party then. Tell them to be more transparent.
Yeah, if Mark Carney wants to show the way, then release those documents right now. Like, he has the ability to release those documents. That one of the reasons the government was prorogued, that they wouldn't release those documents. That has all this green carbon stuff tied up in it.
Yeah, and that's also the reason, in part at least, why we've gone to election now rather than reopening Parliament, because it was supposed to be today, wasn't it? Today was supposed to be Parliament's return. And part of the reason that isn't happening is because of these green documents that the Liberals have insisted on sitting on. They won't let them out there.
Mark Carney's been caught in a few lies already, and if he wants to show some or build some trust with Canadians, release those documents before the election. Release them. Simple. It's very simple. And bring his company back to Canada right now. Just like you wrote with a piece of paper there that you could take it there with a piece of with a stroke of your pen. Bring it back.
Yeah, but he'd have to go and be hired again by Brookfield Asset Management, wouldn't he?
Well, he could say that. I'm sure he has enough pull with the organization still, and he won't
Well,
release.
he seems to live a bit of a charmed life, doesn't he, Mark Carney? And he just kind of parachutes into whatever he wants, really. So
I mean,
I'm sure he could make it happen.
People have said he's not a Canadian; he's an opportunist. So there you go. Speaking of opportunity, though, the Greenland thing, the Americans going to visit there has raised the ire of the Prime Minister, Mute. I'm never going to get this name right. Edgy, calling the planned visit from U.S. officials highly aggressive. Donald Trump has made comments about taking over the semi-autonomous Danish territory. There you go. Both the wife of J.D. Vance and Mike Waltz, our U.S. National Security Advisor, are supposed to separately visit Greenland next week.
I would be interested, talking about opacity and transparency, I would be interested in actually knowing what the plan is here from the Americans.
Yeah.
I do think it's for real. I think they do want Greenland because it's been wanted off and on by the American state for a century or something, probably even longer than that. It's a long-term strategic objective of the government of the United States. People like to pretend that this is just Trump being a moron, but it is actually something they've wanted for ages, and you can read about it. I mean, in the Second World War, they actually took control of it, didn't they, briefly? And potentially, talked about potentially having it then, but it just didn't work out. But I mean, yeah, I want to know how. I want to know what's the actual real strategy, because just to upset people in Greenland and Denmark, that's not really going to work, is it? But it's similar with the Canada thing. Like if your actual objective is to obtain Canada as a part of the United States, wouldn't you be nice to the people of Canada? Like what it just doesn't make sense to me because he's kind of annoyed. He's peed off everybody in Greenland. There's basically like 90% plus of the population seems to despise the Americans, doesn't want anything to do with them. It just seems like a funny way to go about it. So I actually want to know the plan, and that might be what we're going to learn now with the National Security Advisor going there. He might actually provide us with some details.
And somehow I never got this image in here, but we do want to talk about MMA fighter Conor McGregor intentions to run as the president of Ireland. We don't have a graphic for you on that. We just put up the really big show graphic. So Irish fighter Conor McGregor said that he'll run for the president of Ireland in the upcoming election. This comes after his controversial visit to the White House, where he spoke to Donald Trump. McGregor also faces an investigation from the Irish Director of Public Prosecution for alleged incitement of hatred stemming from his social media activities of 2023.
Yeah, he's written a few tweets. That was his social media of choice, I believe, was X. He wrote a few things that upset people. I mean, Ireland is, as people probably are aware, Ireland isn't a very big country. It's only about sort of 5 million people or something like that. And they've been taking in quite large numbers of migrants.
Well, my big question.
And they have a policy in Ireland of spreading them out around the country, because Dublin is like a really overheated economy, and particularly the housing market in Dublin, it's like impossible to get anywhere to live. So they spread them around, and I think they're putting these people from all over the world, like asylum seekers and whatnot. They're putting them in like really quiet, sort of quaint Irish villages and things like that, and you can imagine that that's not really going down very well. And I think McGregor likes to present himself as their defender.
So the big question is, though, and this is the really big question in this, is because if Conor McGregor, because he's a very popular guy, like with the people, Conor McGregor wins, where will Rosie O'Donnell go? You know what I mean? Because she fled the United States because of Donald Trump and MAGA, and here's McGregor's hat is "Make Ireland Great Again," which is Mika, I guess, right? So where will Rosie O'Donnell? Who will take Rosie O'Donnell?
Well, I wonder if she might try for Canada, try her luck in Canada, especially if the Liberals win. Then that'll be one of the last sort of left-wing redoubts. I know quite a few American celebrities have moved to England, which obviously right now is run by the left-wing party there, the Labour Party. Some people are actually like that, aren't they? They will actually move somewhere because of their politics, and it's like they want to move where there's a left-wing party or I guess a right-wing party. But I don't know. I don't know about Rosie O'Donnell. I don't know if she has a connection to Canada, does she?
She had a ludicrous interview there, just like I think this weekend. It was just like some of the stuff she said was just wow, like like she's like trying out for some reality TV show or something like that. I won't even repeat some of the stuff she said, but
Maybe she wants to be a Democratic Party congresswoman like AOC. She'd probably be a centrist compared to
her. This woman says she has to wait 13 months to have an MRI. She may have a brain tumor, and she told that she has to wait till 2026 to get MRI. Yeah, we don't need that. The next image there, Rommel. Wow, I mean, I've heard this too, like from one of our own staff members. Waiting to get in for just a scan is just like forever, and it's just like that's the state of our healthcare system, and that is both a provincial problem and a federal problem.
Yeah, and I mean when it comes to we know provincially we know all about the cancer backlog, don't we? Because they were sending people down into Washington to get because they were worried that they were going to miss the sort of like minimum targets for scans on cancer and cancer treatment. Especially, I mean, there's something especially horrible about the idea that you've got cancer inside of your body and it can't be properly looked at and assessed because of a dysfunctional
and you tell
bureaucracy, basically, a dysfunctional health system.
And you tell somebody that has possibly a brain tumor that they have to wait 13 months just to get a scan. I mean, that could be too late for her. I guess on the positive side, you could say at least it's good that the British Columbia healthcare system is sending people somewhere else for an alternative. But healthcare is typically a provincial matter, but why it's a federal matter as well is that the accelerated immigration that the Liberals have done in the past few years has actually stressed our healthcare system to no ends, where we've actually had people die in the waiting room waiting to see a doctor.
Yeah, well, there are many ways that it's a federal responsibility. Obviously, the health transfers is one sort of thing, isn't it? They can choose to increase or decrease how much money they send to the provinces to top them up on for health, but also immigration, and not just the idea that too many immigrants are coming and it's oversaturating the hospitals and whatnot, but also do they make it easy enough for medically trained people to come to Canada? That's another question, isn't it?
I was in Vegas recently before it was unfashionable to go. Before Donald Trump took office, I was in Vegas, and like the lady at the counter when I was checking in said, "Oh, in Canada you get free healthcare." And I said, "Well, free if you can get any healthcare. Like I mean, free, but non-existent for most people." So, and she's like, "What?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, it's really hard to get in to see anybody if you need a test or a scan. So free really doesn't make a difference if it doesn't exist."
And that's similar in my land of birth there in England. It's similar to that, and the Americans very rarely seem to fully understand that. But I mean, in America, obviously, you have your own. There are other problems, aren't there? Like being billed $4,000 for a glass of orange juice and stuff like that. Like they have their own problems in America. But I suppose at least it depends on your philosophy. It's like at least theoretically in America, you can pay for treatment and get it like right away. Some people really see a lot of comfort in that, and they prefer that system to the one that we have, where if you want to pay for it to get it done, you've got to leave the country. You've got to go somewhere else.
Well, let's move on to markets. Gold still chopping around over that $3,000 mark. US, right? US in US dollars, and then Canadian dollars, 4,308 in Canadian dollars. So there you go.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Our friend Bitcoin, looks like we were talking about at the end of the week last week that it was going to look like it was going to take a run at that $100,000 mark, and looks like we called that again. Banging on the door of 90 now at 88,000. Bitcoin chart looking better now. If you take a look at that chart, the right side of that chart looks like it's building for an upswing there. So there you go. And then the Canadian dollar gets its wish. It gets an election. So we'll see. Again, if they elect a government that is favorable to the natural resource sector, you're going to see a huge bounce in that Canadian dollar. If it doesn't, it will likely start on its way down. Stock market up big time this morning as well. Stock market showing positive trends. Tesla with a huge rebound after getting hammered, and Mike, what was that name? Tim Walz coming out and making fun. He actually apologized for it later, finding out that his own Minnesota pension fund owned quite a bit of Tesla stock, so he got a little bit of heat for that.
I immediately thought that, like, but not necessarily that specific, but I immediately thought, like, there are people in your state who will be, their financial health will depend on Tesla doing well in the stock market, and you're up there like laughing about how it's declining. Just politically, on a political level, that is so stupid. It's like unforgivably stupid, isn't it?
Close to 100,000 employees for Tesla, direct employees that count on Tesla for their living, and then all the spin-off businesses and all the support businesses there. You know, it's a big part, and it is one of the United States' #1 companies. You know, it's like in the top 5 for market cap. So and it's the most American-made vehicle out there. So it is really odd that you have some of these people cheerleading the demise of an American company. And
totally, and especially the Americans, like, they love the stock market, don't they? And they've all got their 401ks and all that. It's like, that seems to me like a very foolish thing to do as a politician that relies on voters to be elected. You know, you don't like rub their noses in it. There are many people in the United States that probably really dislike Donald Trump and Elon Musk, but they still want Tesla to do all right because it's their own money, you know?
There's no doubt there's more pride in the U.S. right now, and we need that in Canada here as well, because I watched a little bit of the wrestling match there held at one of the NCAA colleges or whatever, and the chants in there, USA, 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 is very, very strong, which you haven't seen for a while too, because again, just like Canada, you know, we've had our politicians try to convince us that a post-national Canada is better than, you know, one where we want to wrap our flag around. But now they seem to want to wrap the flag around themselves, when many of us have been here in Canada and have always had the flag wrapped around ourselves.
Well, you saw Mark Carney on St. Paddy's Day in Montreal, didn't you? Taking advantage of Canada having 3 syllables. Canada, Canada. Though I don't know why he did it on St. Paddy's, like, which celebrates another country, but whatever.
I watched the protest saying that you're not allowed to celebrate St. Patrick's Day anymore either. So I'm just like, what is going on with these people? Hyundai, the next, or just another company. Oh, it's Canadian dollar first. Yeah, go back. Sorry, Canadian dollar. We talked about it a little bit anyway. But Hyundai now says it's going to invest. We're going to play this clip here.
South Korean auto giant Hyundai will announce a $20 billion investment in the United States when its chairman visits the White House today. Sources say that pledge includes $5 billion set for a steel plant in Louisiana, with plans to hire 1,500 employees and produce next-generation steel for Hyundai and Kia cars. That move comes after similar investment commitments from SoftBank and chipmaker Taiwan Semiconductor earlier this year.
There you go. Hyundai, just the latest company to invest in the United States. And that's what Canada needs, is some of this investment. We definitely need a government that has a clear mandate and can get investment back into Canada. Because you know what? I heard last night in Poilievre's speech, he's been listening to our show. You know that? Because you know what he used? One of the terms he used yesterday? Giant sucking sound is capital fleas Canada. That's, you and I coined that a while ago. The giant sucking sound is capital fleas Canada.
Yeah, he's been talking about that, the capital part at least. He's been talking about that for a while, hasn't he? And that does make very grim reading, actually, when you look at all of the money that's chosen the US over Canada. It's well, I mean, we talk about it a lot, don't we? There was that not so long ago, that gold company that moved, didn't they? And it happens all the time, sadly.
Yeah, there you go. WestJet in our market stuff too. WestJet quietly alone adds Starlink to their in-flight Wi-Fi. For those people what you call a protesting Elon Musk, make sure you don't tap into that Wi-Fi when you're flying on most airlines now. WestJet added it just recently, and I've flown recently, and it is so nice to be able to have internet access while you're in flight. My daughter just flew to Toronto, and she had in-flight access the whole way too, which is really nice to be able to communicate while you're up in the air.
And or you could find out what mountain you're looking at out the window. Just get your Google Maps out.
Yeah, you can do a lot of things. It's nice to have it though, right? It's nice to, and you're also not at the mercy of them if you want to watch a movie and it costs whatever, like $15 to watch a movie or something like that, right? So
Definitely. But as for it being associated with Trump, sort of indirectly through Elon Musk there, I feel like if it's going to be any airline, it'd be WestJet, wouldn't it? Because they're obviously based in Calgary. Maybe they just think we can do this. The Albertans aren't really going to be that bothered about it.
Most airlines have added it, so maybe they just like WestJet quietly.
Yeah, very, very quietly. Maybe they'll have another name for it. Give it some kind of Canada link or something.
And then in our AI stuff and tech, Claude finally gets internet access. So Claude can now see, which is an AI LLM, can now see the internet, which is, those things are pretty much like useless when they say, well, I don't know anything since past June 2023. Like, okay, so what good is that, Claude? Unless you're searching for something, I don't know, you won't remember this, but when I was a youngster, we actually used the encyclopedias to do our book reports. And I can remember there used to be encyclopedia salesmen that come door to door, and we've only ever had, because we weren't very well off, we were actually very poor. We've only ever had the first two. My book reports were always on like letter A because they gave you the first two as a sign up, and then you had to make payment to get the other book. So we never got past the first two volumes. So mines were always like on ants and stuff like that, right? So.
Well, I'll say not only do I remember encyclopedias from being a young lad, but I also remember when there was something wrong with me and my mother would go upstairs and get the gigantic medical book, the tome of like symptoms, and look through it to see what it was. I mean, that must be so difficult for younger people to understand when they just Google like whatever symptoms they have, don't they? Or they go on ChatGPT or what have you. But yeah, you used to actually have to look in a book to see what your symptoms were.
Yeah, I used to work in a CA firm when I was a youngster as well, and we had a tax accountant in our firm. And he was like God because he did tax law, plus he was an accountant. So, and in his room, there was just wall-to-wall books. So if you brought him a problem, like, a client that had this tax issue, and then he would pour through these books like for days on end to find, like some tax loophole or something like that. And nowadays, you can just type it into ChatGPT and it'll give you the answer in a few seconds. Whereas, before he'd pour through these books, like, the encyclopedias. I can remember in the school that I went to, I think it was in grade 4 even, like getting access to encyclopedia was like, like you had to be, the librarian would check your hands and everything, and she would get you the book and lay it out on the table for you so that it was treated like it was like the Grail, right? Like you didn't want to be just having any kid kind of muck around with it, right? So.
It's funny you mention accountants there, but lawyers as well. Like if you go in to see a lawyer in his little den and every single space is taken up with gigantic law books, isn't it? But yeah, just the same. They can just ChatGPT it these days.
Yeah, the librarian actually treated like it was the books of knowledge presented by, an alien culture or something like that, like you had to say what page you wanted to go to and she would turn the page for you and just basically lay
with the gloves on as well, the white gloves.
Basically lay it out there for you, and then that was what you were allowed to look at, right? But it was like, there you go. In our EV segment, we'll play a little clip of this here talking about, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit, so we're just gonna play a small clip of this.
The federal government has unveiled its roadmap to phase out the sale of gas and diesel passenger vehicles. After 2035, you won't be able to buy new ones anymore. The regulations will require automakers to sell 20% zero-emission cars by 2026, 60% by 2030, and 100% by 2035. As Abigail Beeman reports.
There you go, and you and I have talked about this a few times. If the United States got rid of the EV mandate, and if they don't get rid of it here in Canada, we're likely not going to see any auto manufacturing happen in Canada.
Yeah, and we're also, I mean, if they're going to stick to their guns completely on that, we're not going to see many new cars at all, really, because EVs are very expensive. We've completely banned, in effect, the cheapest EVs on earth, which come out of China. We did that in solidarity with the United States. Some good that did us. So, you know, we don't really have like an abundance of cheap EVs for people to transition to. And then there's the other thing, yeah, we might lose the whole auto industry.
And then let's add to that, like the best EVs in the market, we basically are trying to ban them as well. Like Tesla, with banning them from certain programs, and Chrystia Freeland talking about putting 100% tariff on them as well. They make literally no sense. Like their policies make literally no sense. But
yeah,
hey,
I like it. It really does. It's one of those things, and it's not like we're the only people that have seen this and point this out. Like almost everybody in this field with even a little bit of knowledge of this points this out, that there's just, it does not add up. You put that into Claude there, or ChatGPT, and he would tell you, don't even think about it. That's not going to work.
And here's where it does make sense for the companies. So Northvolt, which went belly up, and that after, the Ottawa, the feds put in 1.3.4 billion, and then the Quebec put in 1.37 billion, and there you go. They took almost like 2.6 billion, 2.7 billion dollars from Canadians for this failed EV plant. Well, battery plant, I should say. And there you go. And there's been several of these. We have one in British Columbia as well. It's been like these we invest in, I guess, second or third rate kind of companies when there's clearly leaders out there that don't even need the government investment, and we treat them badly. Like, they can say the Chinese EVs, some of them are just like, they're just a cut above the rest. And then here we go. General Motors plans to discontinue its popular Cadillac CT5 and CT4 models, replacing them with new electric vehicles by 2026. So there you go. Not your daddy's Cadillac. That was their kind of like their
You've got, I have to draw your attention to a comment there on YouTube. Somebody saying that EVs don't work in Canada. I think you would probably object to that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would say like it's a half right comment and a half wrong comment. So there you go. They work in certain areas very, very well. Like urban centers, they work really well. And I would say if you're in the literal north, like, and in some of the bigger areas, and you're traveling in the north where, like most of Canada's hard work happens, it's tougher for sure, because if you pull up a Tesla supercharger network, and you'll see that the United States is well covered, and mostly the bottom sliver of Canada is covered, but not so much in the north yet. So, it's like everything, like it's you have to kind of look at it, right? And I would say pickup trucks are still a ways away too, right? And the charging network has to be built out. I worked in the north. I worked in high level Alberta, and also worked in Thompson, Manitoba, lived in Fort Vermilion, and Fort St. John, and different places like that. Yeah, it'd be tougher there for sure, right? Especially for work trucks going out to Rainbow Lake and Zama, for anybody out there that knows those areas. Those trucks are definitely going to need like more infrastructure before you look at that. But if you live in the cities, the Vancouvers, Kelownas, Calgarys, Torontos, and stuff like that, EVs are definitely usable. And if you had an EV this morning, you wouldn't be sitting in a freezing cold car.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And to be honest, it probably wouldn't have exploded and stopped working in the first place with black smoke coming out of the exhaust.
And you're still waiting to hear what that's going to look like, right? Because like they think about the complexity of a gas car, and I've had many. I was a bow tie guy forever, Corvettes and all that kind of stuff. Is the complexity in a gas car is huge. With pistons and crankshafts and timing belts and valves and all this stuff, very, very complex. And if you think about an electric motor, it's copper and magnets, really. It's very, very simplistic. And I've worked in mines and mills and stuff like that, and most of the motors that run those things are electric because they're very reliable.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, it's certainly, I think, again, that's something that neutral experts, let's call them, have also acknowledged that, haven't they? That they are ultimately more reliable in that sense. They break down less often, don't they?
Yeah, Glenn here said Zama's his old stomping ground. Yeah, I worked out in the oil field out there in Zama and Rainbow Lake. Definitely an Assumption. Definitely a place of memories for sure, right? And just outside of High Level there. High Level being the hub up there, right? So I'm sure Glenn is quite familiar with High Level, Alberta as well. I still have family in High Level. So there you go. And that brings us, like, we definitely really appreciate the comments and the thoughts, and we try to communicate with people as we're doing this stuff. A different kind of news organization for sure, and we try to share our thoughts about the news that's going on there. Yeah, the car wash was a gravel pit. Yeah, lots of cool stuff, and you know, one of the cool things about Rainbow Lake and Zama and High Level and Thompson, Manitoba, and all that stuff is the Northern Lights on a cold winter, a clear night is just unbelievably incredible. So if you get a chance to go up there one time, it's well worth the trek. We got a meme though. We got a meme for you, and this is something that's very popular lately for a lot of people. But the Cookie Monster thought he'd give it a whirl, because obviously cookies are not the best diet food in the world, but he's still chucking the cookies down, but he's losing weight. So win.
It doesn't quite capture the distinctive facial appearance of somebody that's been on Ozempic, though, does it? Needs a bit more detail, I think.
As Charlie Sheen would say, winning. And like Charlie Sheen, in his way, winning not so much, right? Winning,
yeah,
Charlie Sheen way, right? Well, we look forward to hear what happens with your car. We can find out tomorrow, and then thank you for watching Kelowna Now. And the election, it's going to be heavily focused on the election till April 28th for sure. We're going to try and get interviews as well with anybody that will willing to talk to us. And Ruby Dalla said she was thinking about it, but I don't know. Ruby Dalla, she's still making memes out there, but
too busy on the meme assembly line, isn't she?
So, anyway, that's it for today. We do thank you for watching Kelowna Now. Share, like, and do all those things. We really appreciate it if you share it, get more people involved, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.